I know Justin a little bit, and I wouldn't put words in his mouth, but I don't think he came to take that role to just maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
I think he took that role to transform one of the most important companies in wireless to become the most important company in wireless. And in order to do that, there needs to be some step function changes, and there needs to be some architectural shifts.
Yeah.
And he's in the beginning. This is, I believe, the first of many that will come from Nokia, and I think they'll soon establish industry leadership unless other folks follow.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Telecoms.com podcast, recorded in Dublin at the FYUZ event. And those who are watching on video will be able to see that we're at the Cohere stand, Dublin, and we've got a special guest, returning special guest, Ray from Cohere, CEO, and then we've also got Brad from Bell Canada. Thanks a lot for coming on, Brad. And so, yeah, we already had a chat yesterday. In fact, we're gonna see how it goes because we recorded an audio segment yesterday, and thanks to your generosity, we drank far too much whiskey and Guinness yesterday, and maybe we'll do it again today. But so we basically had a deep dive in a lot of the stuff you're talking about. I'm going to before I ask you specifically to tell us what you've been talking about. In terms, I was just explaining to Brad that we usually have a section called Opening Bollocks, so I should get that out of the way. Well, we'll make it small bollocks today. And what have we been up to? I mean, this is what we've been up to mainly. We got here yesterday. Your bags nearly got lost, didn't they, Ian?
Yep.
But then we eventually got there, and then we hit the ground running in the pub with these guys. The only other thing I wanted to mention, because we both went to it, is I had tickets to a gig. There's a band called Sensor that I really like. They're like a mixture of metal and sort of, I don't know, hip-hoppy, rappy sort of stuff, innit?
Yeah, I'd never heard of them.
He'd never heard of them. And I bought 2 tickets, originally intending my son to come along, but he blew me out.
He decided he didn't like it.
He just couldn't be bothered. So I went, Ian, do you fancy coming along? And so I dragged Ian to a gig. I think that's the first time we've been to a gig together, isn't it?
No, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Good fun. Oh yeah, apart from those O2 gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're different.
Right. I think that's quite enough opening bollocks.
Yes.
I'm going to say, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, Ray, because you're talking about a lot of stuff. We've both written stories about Cohere recently, but I'm going to just pass it straight to you. What are the main themes that you're talking about at the show this year?
Yeah, so here in Ireland at FYUZ, we're talking about 2 fundamental aspects of our technology. The newest announcement that we made last week at the GCT conference in DC was our pulse own technology, which we'll talk about. It's a candidate for 6G as a waveform that does ISAC. ISAC is widely popular right now. It's generally being perceived to be.
Can you remind us what ISAC stands
So
for?
ISAC stands for Integrated Sensing and Communication.
Right.
It also, I believe, stands for Improving Situational Awareness Using Cellular.
Right.
So as people get used to this notion of sensing and communication in the same bucket, we are introducing a waveform that is both a pulse and a tone at the same time. So as the industry gets more and more used to that, you'll see some of the merits. We'll talk about that maybe later in the pod. What I want to talk about early on is our universal spectrum multiplier. Same fundamental technology, OTFS, which stands for orthogonal time frequency in space. It's the space part that's new. And that's a layer 2 technology that allows the scheduler to allocate the same resources to multiple people in the sector. So every time you double or triple or quadruple the resources, you double, triple or quadruple the spectral efficiency and the utilization of every asset, including the antennas, the radios, and the base station. I'm here with Brad because Brad's been, and Bell Canada more broadly, have been great partners to Cohere. It's public that they've been an investor in Cohere for quite some time.
Cool.
They've been trialing some network equipment in what we hope are approaching the final stages of proof points that'll drive to commercial commitments down the road. So it's great to hear the voice of the customer along with the voice of the technology provider.
Why is spectral efficiency an important thing? I mean, it sounds, obviously efficiency's better. Right. Can you tell us a bit more about why we care?
So spectrum is the raw resource that generates the franchise for all the cellular operators today. It is limited. And if you get your head around this, marked to today's dollars US, there's roughly $1 trillion of spectrum in use today. By cellular operators around the world. So
that's like the total value of all the licenses.
All right, so just imagine that in the enablement of cellular, before they even put hardware in towers on the ground, they've got $1 trillion of spectrum out there. So anyone that can make that spectrum work harder, 50% or 100% harder, is improving the value of $1 trillion asset globally.
Can't argue with that.
And if you can do that in a piece of software, and you can do that in a way that's easy to consume for operators like Bell Canada and others, I think we'll actually have Paco joining later from Vodafone, who's also been supportive of the company for many years. You can start to imagine that a company like Cohere with new technology can help the industry move forward in orders of like hundreds of billions of dollars worth of value. Right? So I'm very excited about it. It's not for the faint of heart. It's A, it's new. B, it needs to be integrated into existing systems that have earned over many decades the trust of companies like Bell and Vodafone and frankly all of the operators. And those that's a fairly small universe of suppliers, and we're working with those suppliers to integrate our technology today.
Yeah, I guess the concern of the incumbent, should we say, without mentioning names, but the small group of RAN vendors that you get is coming along with something that boosts spectrum efficiency this much has potential implications for what they sell. I guess that's one of the challenges for.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are folks in the world that look at the world as a zero-sum game. But let's face it, this is not a model industry for attracting investment.
Yes.
A number of the operators are struggling. The entire supply chain is struggling. You show me one of those RAN incumbents that has managed to print more than 2 quarters in a row of successful, attractive investor outcomes.
Yeah.
This is just screaming for, we need a new architecture. We've spent 20 years virtualizing things. We now need to shift them in their architecture towards a much more profitable architecture. And if that requires a small hiccup in the supply chain in order to get to the promised land, we think we can manage through that. We're more than willing to share the pie. When you create hundreds of billions of dollars worth of value, there's plenty of pie to share.
Can I just ask Brad, because you've been testing it, I think it was earlier this year, there was another update, and you've been an investor for quite a while, but from a practical sense, what does it mean? Because we hear these percentages thrown out, and it does this for spectrum efficiency, but what are we actually looking at in terms of what this means for an operator's sort of business model, I guess?
Yeah, well, when we go to provide a service to customers, the key thing is spectrum, as we were talking about, and it's a very expensive resource. And in the absence of spectrum, our option is to put more cell sites in, more towers, more coverage. And that is also a very expensive proposition. So any tool or technique that we can use to bring down those costs, get more out of our existing asset is a very welcome thing, right? So we're focusing a lot on how do we reduce congestion with a software approach as opposed to a hardware or adding additional spectrum to the sites.
So it really is a case of if this works out as planned, it's potentially avoiding having to invest in lots of small cells or something.
You got it, exactly. We'll look at, let's say the cost of 5 megahertz, 10 megahertz to add to an existing cell site, and we'll also look at, well, how much does a whole cell site cost to put in, whether it's a small cell or a full macro site. And we're using that to kind of look at the trade-offs between adding algorithms like Cohere's versus the physical augmentation of those existing assets. Yeah.
And what's it like? I mean, the trials that you've done, what are you seeing?
Well, so we saw between 10 and 50% improvement on spectral efficiency, and it varied based on conditions, as you can imagine, user behavior, where we call it the angular separation, but basically where those users were placed relative to the cell site and what obstacles were in the way, reflecting signals would kind of make the algorithm react a bit differently. But lower end or upper end, it's all welcome, right? That's a big boost in those existing assets for a little bit of additional computational resources to run that algorithm.
It sounds like a no-brainer. Why isn't it ubiquitous, this technology?
Well,
or is it?
It's not yet. It will be. First thing we had to do was prove that it worked.
Yeah.
We've generated performance, as Brad said, more frequently at the higher end of that range that he quoted. And I believe we'll blow through that high end of the range as we continue to mature the product. So I'm not worried that we're making a difference. But remember, the first thing we had to do was build all of this on Dell servers, Intel FlexRAN 5, Capgemini stack, to prove that the impact was worth the work. Because this was required a significant amount of work by companies like Bell and Vodafone and others to help us work with their ecosystem to drive through the resistance. to show that the short-term pain was worth the long-term gain.
Yeah.
And frankly, anybody that thinks that they can continue to profit if the operators don't profit is playing a fool's game. Whereas if you follow the long-term profitability trajectory of the operators, you'll always find that you tail fairly close behind that with your own profitability. So we've now had at least one main RAN vendor, thanks to the support that we've gotten from Brad personally, as well as Bell Canada more broadly, and Paco personally, as well as Vodafone more broadly.
Who would be sitting here if his plane wasn't delayed?
He will be.
But hopefully he'll
sitting
turn
here
up.
shortly. It takes a village, if you will, to push through that resistance and then port that software from our system to their system, and then from just that system to everyone's system. So this is a journey. We're well through it. We've started that journey of porting from our standalone system to the other vendor system a little over a year ago. We'll be doing some final testing in Canada later this year. My guess is it'll be followed by some final testing after that,
Yes.
because you're never done. But we do believe that soon, if we haven't already, we'll achieve what Brad calls sufficient, even on the low end, to generate the drive to commercialization, because we're never going to stop. We're not going to stop at 10, and we're not going to stop at 50, and we're not going to stop at 100. We're just going to continue to make networks better and better and better.
Right.
So it'll be up to Bell, and it'll be up to Vodafone, it'll be up to other operators as to when they want to transition from testing to commercial. But we think we're probably within 12 months of that.
Okay.
And when we're within 12 months of that, we'll move quickly through to all vendors, and it'll be ubiquitous.
What's the main route that you see it sort of taking into commercial networks? Because I know you were working with an XApp, weren't you, previously? And then there was another option of having it directly integrated in the base station.
Well, you use the term XApp, which has a very specific meaning, but if you open that XApp meaning, it's a separate application running on a server behind a base station. That's where we're at now. That will easily port into a base station for those that have room in it, and many do, and some don't. So there's some issues that people have to work through with their vendors. Is that in a company as complex as Bell, they've got equipment probably vintage 21, 22, 23, 24, right? It's just constantly rolling.
The number
right?
of cores.
Yeah, and so some of the older ones have fewer cores, some of the newer ones have multiple cores.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see hybrid rollouts where, to the extent that it can be integrated, it will be. To the extent it can't be, it'll stay in a separate server. I want to talk at some point in time about the announcement made last week, which I think was a transcendent type of announcement where NVIDIA invested in Nokia
Well, I wanted to ask you about
transition
that
the
anyway.
industry to Cloud RAN, and said that the first two things they're going to port to the GPU architecture were going to be the scheduler and beamforming, which is exactly what we're testing with Brad and Bell. So
that announcement was quite positive for you.
I think it's an extremely positive, not just because it makes for a healthier Nokia, which eventually makes for a healthier entire ecosystem, but and it brings a huge category killer of NVIDIA into the ecosystem, which desperately needs investment. If you just look at the state-sponsored
They
investment
got
of
a few
China,
bucks over at NVIDIA.
well, if we, as the Western world, if we don't respond to the investment strength and intensity of China, which is top down through the state sponsorship,
Yeah.
and if we try to aggregate the existing supply chain R&D, it's never going to compete, in my opinion.
Right.
However, if you bring in players like the cloud players or NVIDIA and other silicon players, the West can absolutely flip that and develop the R&D intensity over several years. That was not one announcement that's going to transform the industry in a trade show. That was an announcement that committed to transform our industry over a period of years.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's a similar argument to the one about bringing Intel and general purpose processors into the sector and sort of being able to kind of ride on the coattails of it, I guess, because the market's relatively small. There's this concern about whether it will have the R&D to kind of innovate on custom silicon, and that argument's been around for a long time, but we've still not really seen things like virtual RAN and open RAN sort of take off. But do you think this is going to be significant?
Well, I'm open, and I'd love to hear Brad's point of view on that. But the way I look at the first pass, it was virtualization of network functions, allowing them to run on merchant silicon that scaled to the moon, but it wasn't programmable. Okay, so when you take things that from hardware, bespoke hardware, you move them into software and you allow them to run on general purpose compute, but you don't change the fundamental architecture, you don't solve the problem.
Yeah.
With the GPU, what's going to happen, I believe, is it's going to allow the architectural shift from a localized solution to a cloud RAN solution. and it's going to allow all of the functions that have been virtualized to become programmable. In fact, all the way down to the PHY. When we do talk about the pulse zone, the fundamental benefit of the pulse zone is that it's programmable. What people may not realize yet is the pulse zone has already rendered a 4G waveform. So 4G base station or 4G terminal could connect to a pulse zone base station. So can a 5G. And no matter what 6G does in 3GPP, a pulse zone will communicate with it because it's a programmable mother waveform that can create any waveform. There's a huge difference between virtualization to merchant silicon and full programmability.
Right.
And that's what I think the Nokia announcement was about.
Yes,
With NVIDIA.
it's interesting the argument about matching China as well, because I remember being on the call with the Justin Hotard at Nokia had with analysts, and he made that point. No one seemed to pick up on it, but
I thought the NVIDIA release, it really struck me how geopolitical it was. How many references there to sort of, raising America's game
but it
and all
didn't
that sort
say
of thing.
we need to do this to sort of stand up to China.
Right.
And
Well, that's been quite a persistent thing from Nokia, isn't it? They were doing that when we were over in Finland.
Yeah.
They were kind of...
yeah, he seems to be more willing to kind of stick his name out and say things that other CEOs in Europe are a bit.
You're talking about Justin?
Justin,
Yeah.
yeah, they've been a bit worried about saying.
Well, I think
perhaps.
I know Justin a little bit, and I wouldn't put words in his mouth, but I don't think he came to take that role
Yeah,
to just maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
I think he took that role to transform one of the most important companies in wireless to become the most important company in wireless. And in order to do that, there needs to be some step function changes, and there needs to be some architectural shifts.
Yeah.
And he's in the beginning. This is, I believe, the first of many that will come from Nokia, and I think they'll soon establish industry leadership unless other folks follow.
what do you think of it, Brad? Because there's been a lot of talk about the GPUs, some of the AI RAN side of things. And,
Yeah, it's an important change that I think we need to go through. As I look at sort of the AI evolution, we talk a lot about how can the AI inference be pushed closer to the edge, right? And we're still waiting for those use cases that really drive that inference, but we can all kind of foresee that it's coming at some point where we need just more access to edge inference across the whole network to make for a good customer experience. So, whether it's NVIDIA or something else, the ability to run AI efficiently without dramatically increasing the costs at the edge is an important thing we have to transition to. And at Bell, we've been a big proponent of Cloud RAN, of Open RAN, of openness and collaboration, and that architectural shift still hasn't fully taken root. We're still kind of, 1 foot in one camp, 1 foot in the other camp, and we're really looking for...
It's definitely sort of crawled along a little bit, that transition, hasn't it?
Exactly. We're really looking for that, the raison that main reason to push ahead in cloud, and Cohere's algorithm could be one of those main reasons.
Right, Cohere's algorithm, and then, as you say, Ray, statement moves like NVIDIA showing such a massive interest in the telecoms industry. I mean, as a telecoms journalist, I'm slightly conflicted. There's a part of it that's like, whenever you get sort of hyperscalers or American big tech or whatever getting involved, there's a part of it where you feel a bit protective and like, this is our industry, you go and do your thing. But then on the flip side, in terms of all the transformation that you two were just talking about, we obviously do need a bit of a kick up the arse and a bit of a catalyst and all that sort of thing. And who better to provide that right now than NVIDIA? But one thing I wanted to say on that announcement that occurred to me, you just touched on some of the things that are relevant to it. There's not consensus that that AI RAN and having a GPU at the cell site and that sort of thing is necessarily a good thing. And with my little understanding of it, the return on investment, it doesn't seem to be a slam dunk as far as I'm concerned. What do you? I'll start with you. What do you feel about some of that pushback?
Well, I think the assumption is that you start putting large, very expensive GPUs into the cell site, right? Where you can look at all the models that are commercially going into data centers, and you say, well, if we're going to put that at the edge, well,
there's
that's
H100s,
A100s, but all the variety of GPUs, they're very expensive, right?
Yeah.
So when we're operating in a model where we're trying to reduce the costs at all costs of these cell sites, it's a hard business case. But I think as technology evolves, these GPUs will get more efficient, will get more cost effective, and will be easily added into the hardware at a good price. If you just sort of plot out the trajectory of the technology evolution, At some point, it'll make sense that they're there.
And you've got to get, as you, I think you're alluding to, you just got to get the right product in there. You don't need an absolute blockbuster, do everything one. You just need one that's got the right amount of power for whatever that use case is. What do you think of those objections?
You can either bring the mountain to Mohammed, or you can bring Mohammed to the mountain, right? So I think NVIDIA wins either way. And there's a lot of folks that think, oh, they're going to try to stuff GPUs at the edge. And it is possible. Brad talked about what the challenges will be from the operator community. They're on a cost curve that's driving this way for good reason. And it flies in the face of going to a more expensive silicon solution until it's proven out. Maybe the use case is proven to be such a revenue driver that you change your cost model. Maybe. I don't know what that is. But frankly, no one saw the iPhone coming either, right? So you have to leave that door open. But I think other than that door being open, Brad has articulated the use case, the strategy, if you will, of like waiting for the cost structure of the GPU and the maturity to go down market. And then maybe some of those solutions will fit nicely into the cost structure of where the base station is going. I want to open the door to the opposite, which is what if, in fact, the use cases that work well on a GPU move from the base station at the edge into the data center, right? We've been exploring taking beamforming and scheduling with enough latency to where we can move it from the base station to the data center. It turns out that not only does that make sense silicon-wise, but it makes sense from the network's point of view, because now the interference that exists. So when you schedule from within a base station, you see the interference within a base station. When you schedule from the data center, you see the interference across the city. The system is interference limited. Half the interference is from inside the base station, half is from the city. The problem that the local scheduler doesn't see is seen when you move the scheduler to the cloud. Right? So as we explore that, we're going to take data, Brett says it's 10 to 50%. You're going to see numbers go from hundreds of percent when the scheduler, in fact, addresses the coordination of interference that's coming from between base stations. You can't do that now if those workloads are done locally at the very edge. Right? So it may be that NVIDIA and Nokia wins by re-architecting the network to where the scheduling function moves to the data center.
Indeed.
Is hosted, 50 base stations could be hosted on a single GPU. The cost structure of that becomes trivial relative to the cost structure of a RAN. And what's left behind is what a simple DU, which actually was the vision of Open RAN, with a very, very simple DU, a slightly more complicated CU, and then a control plane behind it. So, and this has been going on for, 10 years now, Open RAN technology?
I guess the radio units were also supposed to be quite simple as well at first, and then there was that sort of big confab a couple of years ago where they ended up coming out with the email BI stuff that I know was a bit controversial because it put some functionality back into the radio units that some people weren't very keen on.
But at the end of the day, follow the operator economics, because the operator CapEx cannot come without revenue, right?
Yeah.
So if the revenue is growing 5% and the usage is growing 40%, somebody better drive an architecture that gets CapEx in line with revenue, or the industry's going to pause. And the precedent for that was exactly that in 3G. It generated more all-you-can-eat voice. So the carrier-wide revenue is growing single digits. The CapEx was growing double digits, and everyone built a coverage layer and stopped. Same thing happened in 4G to 5G. Everybody thought this was going to do new things. It generated more all-you-can-eat broadband. Usage growth went like this. Revenue growth went like this. Everyone built a coverage layer and stopped. Right? So the supply chain would be very wise, I think, to realize that unless they develop the right CapEx to revenue relationship for their operator partners, they're on the wrong side of that trade. So you can either look at this short term saying, oh, you're going to impair my quarter next quarter, or you can say, I got to get this industry where it needs to be. I believe that the NVIDIA Nokia announcement was a bellwether to say, we're going where the industry needs to be, no matter what anybody else does. And if the right thing to do is put a down market GPU at the edge, that's what we're going to do. If the right thing to do is move workloads to the cloud, that's what we're going to do. Because we need to create the right CapEx to revenue economics for operators.
Can I ask you something specific? And I don't know if Brad might want to look at this, but on the sort of economics of the USM and what it allows you to do and maybe not spend money on, would it reduce the need for some of these, massive MIMO radios tend to be quite expensive, and there's a lot of antenna elements in them that tend to be sort of installed, I guess, in busy areas. But if an operator was taking advantage of USM, would it allow you to make do with a 44R in place of something that's got multiple? Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's an either or. I kind of look at how can they be used together. How can I leverage them both to improve the customer experience? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We call it the customer of one, right? We're trying to focus this on improving that individual customer's experience. And if the Cohere algorithm with the massive MIMO radios give me that best experience at a good cost structure, then that's the way it will work.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. It's important to note that when the company's 13 years old now, our first attempt to commercialize was at the transition from 4G to 5G. We lost that battle for a whole bunch of reasons, but during that battle, we demonstrated 16T, 16R in the Telefonica campus in Madrid. A number of folks attended that. It's well documented. It's still in our history. And we were able to deliver 14 layers in a 16TR.
Right.
So we scale not perfectly linearly, but close to linear. I've actually had a customer tell me at the show that we do better with 4TR and your USM than we've ever done in massive MIMO, and they've got a lot of experience in massive MIMO. You can think of, so if I use this illusion of like billiard table, and you've taken the cue ball and you break, you hit it as hard as you can, and you hope something goes in. After that, it's much more precise. You go 7-ball corner pocket, 7 off the 3 side pocket, right? We're playing that game of billiards. We literally steer energy. Massive MIMO takes the break and adds even more energy to it. They're now using 64 elements to spit energy out there, hoping some of it lands on the phone. Of course, more is going to land when 64 things transmit, but it's going to be incredibly expensive. Hi, Paco. How are you?
Hey, welcome.
Yeah, glad to welcome Paco, who
Hi guys.
Hi, Paco.
raced over here from the Dublin airport.
Well done.
After a delayed flight. So Paco, we've had probably about 20 minutes or so of discussion, and Brad's been nice enough to join us for it. He shared from Bell's perspective, and I hope that you will do the same from Vodafone's perspective. Things like how you see the USM working in your network, either in tests or how it might work commercially down the road, how we're working with vendors, what your alternative architectures look like. We've explored a little bit about the NVIDIA Nokia announcement. If you're welcome to opine on that if you haven't. And then eventually we're going to just transition to some 6G discussions because we've announced our Pulse Zone. And I want to share with the audience and welcome your perspective on 3GPP and how you see things playing out in 6G. But
So, yeah, I'll just say, on saying welcome, Paco, and also I haven't told our audience, we've got coffee cups here, but we're not drinking coffee. This is some Irish whiskey called Powers Gold Label.
I should try
So
it.
it's not obligatory, but we advise it. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
It wouldn't be a Telecoms.com podcast without a bit of alcohol involved. It's very on brand for us, Paco, if you didn't know. But yeah, why don't we just invite you in? I mean, should we just talk about?
I'll give a little bit of background just
Yeah.
to give you something to talk off of, Paco. But I've known Paco for many years now. Vodafone's been a great partner to Cohere, really driving us to turn our solution into something that can be consumed by the entire industry by focusing first, of course, on Vodafone's needs. We did a lab test in 2001. We did a field test in Ciudad Real in 2024. And Paco, along with Brad and others at Bell, has been instrumental helping us drive our bespoke standalone solution into their existing vendors. Because this really works best. In fact, it might only work logically for them to rip out hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equipment in order to improve the network is one thing.
It's a big ask.
To allow them to squirt software into their existing networks to improve, completely different, right? But that means opening the minds and hearts and networks of incumbents and finding space in old networks and working around initially with a standalone server and eventually with a fully integrated solution. So Paco, if you'd like to talk about our experience together.
Yeah, no, I think as you say, it's been a long journey. For us, I mean, now we are deploying Open RAN, and on a like-for-like basis, you know that you can use it even if it stands scenarios. But the idea from the beginning wasn't only to have the same radio done in a different way. We want to unlock some innovation, and I have to say that from the very beginning, we saw something in your solution, and this is also Open RAN. It's not just about open interfaces, about making sure that you can speed up innovation and make it happen. And I think we are very close with you guys, so very encouraging, and certainly a disruption, because when you compare any metric, using a solution like yours, you think about the energy that you use per bit, for example, compared to not having your solution, significantly changes the side. Also the economics. So the disruption we were looking for from the beginning, I think it's closer than ever now.
Yeah, so Paco and Brad represent, a lot of the brains, if you will, of the operator community. They get into the details: power consumption, compute requirements, latency-based capabilities, multi-carrier. They're all running very large single RAN architectures. This is like probably the accumulation of 20 years of experience. So we don't generally talk about it at the pod, but some of the nuances, spectral efficiency is one thing, but we can do it actually with less compute than conventional resources. It makes people's head hurt thinking, how do you do something more complicated with less compute?
Indeed. But you can.
Well, so we grew out of the radar logic, if you will, of sensing. So we sense the distance to a reflector and the velocity vector of a reflector, very much like a police officer does when you're speeding down the road, right? And he knows how fast you're going, pulls you over and gives you a ticket. And he knows it was you, and he can separate you from the clutter, et cetera. So if you do that and create a digital twin of the reflective environment in this room, then the brain of the base station says, oh, I know exactly how to send a beam to Paco's phone.
Yeah.
Because Paco's phone there's some line of sight, but there's also 12 reflections, and I'm going to use those reflections. So instead of trying to figure out how to get past the reflections as impairments, we say those reflections are assets, not impairments.
That's very clever.
And those reflections don't move very fast. So now the roof doesn't move, the lights don't move, that cart moves, a few people move. So relative to the speed of light, we end up slowing the world down. If you think of a snow globe, it's like you put it on the windowsill and it all just calms down. So we take a very, very complex RF environment and we slow it down to a deterministic environment. We see its building blocks, and then we use those building blocks to do work. And that's when he says, like, oh my gosh, I think you guys are onto something. Years ago, Vodafone concluded, you're onto something. The only question is how much and does it scale?
Yeah.
And can we convince our supply chain to make it easy to consume, or are we going to have to rip all this out? But from the very beginning, they concluded that we were onto something. And Bell very early on did the same thing. So it's those companies that have been passionate. We couldn't do this without their support, right? They've had to put us through different use cases, put us into the city like Ciudad Real, put us into an airport like you did in Toronto. And then we learn, and then we share, and we learn. So in the journey that we've been on, we did a lab. First, we did a demo with Deutsche Telekom in Bonn because COVID happened and everything closed out. Then we went to a lab in the UK. Then we went to Melbourne Tech in Australia. Then we went to Toronto. Then we went to Ciudad Real. Now we're back in Canada. So, and each of these operators has made us better and better and raised the bar on us. And so my sense is we're close, Paco, but you make the call, and Brad, you make the call when you go commercial. But at some point in time, there'll be a conclusion that says, this makes enough of a difference that we're willing to pay enough money for Cohere to do this with at least one of our vendors. And then what will happen is every vendor will follow, because there's not a network that isn't congested. Yeah. And if there is a new one, the purpose of that network is to drive it to congestion.
So you're basically do a bit of active listening. I think you're saying that once the first few real case implementations prove themselves, then because I don't think it's unfair to say the telecoms industry compared to some other parts of the tech sector can be a bit risk averse, can be a bit conservative, can be a bit slow moving. I mean, we're here at FYUZ, which I've always associated with Open RAN, and that's been a thing we've been talking about for a while. And I'm not passing judgment on it as a good or bad thing, but it's been a slow evolving thing, hasn't it? But what all of you seem to be saying is that we might be on the cusp in this traditionally quite slow-moving sector of actually some quite fast movement and some serious disruption. Is that right?
100%. And this industry has had several episodes of go slow, go slow, go slow, and then go overnight. If you
Yeah.
think of the transition LTE, it felt to an industry that does things over 10 years, it felt like it happened overnight. The iPhone had a lot to do with it because all of a sudden we went from a WAP, internet, closed garden to, oh my gosh, all you can eat mobile broadband, which, by the way, generated another decade of profitability for everyone.
Indeed.
Until a lot of social media players sucked a lot of value out of the industry.
Yeah.
But
I think one important point is that all the assumptions we had when we started Open Run have been validated. I think it's true too that the pace hasn't gone, as we wanted, but this is also traditionally something that happens in technology. You see the hype, then things take more time. But if we had to go back a few years, everything is happening as we.
Okay, so it's going according to plan.
Yeah.
I would say potentially even better. And the reason I say that is where we operate in partnership with one of the large RAN suppliers is at the very brain of the base station, the scheduler and beamformers. A lot of people thought Open RAN was going to be like the PC, where you have some peripherals that can plug and play.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe there'll be an antenna, or maybe somebody will make a new radio and plug it into an Ericsson base station or some peripheral. We are opening the very heart, the very core of what a RAN does in scheduling, and Cohere is a complete new company generating a software solution that's inserting itself into the control plane of the RAN. Now, people think of Open RAN as this interface or that interface, and they got or an X app or an R app or a D app. And the terminology, whether you call RUSM an X app or anything, it will be a piece of software, which is generally speaking an application, that will make networks dramatically better at the control plane level. If that's not Open RAN, I don't know what it is.
Yes, Andrew.
So you were doing tests in Ciudad Real, is that right?
Yes.
Last year, I think we talked about it. But what sort of improvements were you seeing? We talked to Brad a bit about work in Canada.
We saw, consistent spectral efficiency 1.5. So increase in capacity.
Good.
So that was incredible. I mean, even less than that is also a big achievement. And
So-
we were testing different devices, different scenarios, mobility, no mobility, in a real environment. I mean, we had done the test in the lab before a couple of years earlier, but obviously moving from lab to field is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
But the field was okay, and I think now the challenge is to get the first integration with a big supplier, and then I think the rest will have to follow because it's material.
So it could, because obviously it's big days for Vodafone with announcements of what's going on in Europe and there's some densification going on there, it seems. Is that an opportunity then to sort of get this out there potentially?
Yeah. We're looking at our plans for the next 4 or 5 years, so certainly this is hitting that time window.
And it could be a way of, I'm guessing from a practical perspective, the kind of benefits that you'd see are just relieving pressure on you to bring more spectrum into use or avoiding the need to buy expensive radios.
It's a technology disruption, then how you use it, whether it's to deploy more sites or save money, it's a different story, but in terms of the disruption, it's clearly there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to ask, what the actual implications of spectral efficiency are to an operator in terms of how it benefits your business. And I guess, is it just efficiency? Is just doing more with less? Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, it's as simple as that. I mean, we don't have to buy more spectrum. We don't have to put more towers in if we get more out of those existing assets. So that's really the big driver for us, is how can we sweat those assets more?
Yeah, it should be noted though, like in this industry, you've got massive cloud capacity. I mean, almost unquantifiable, and it's doubling every year.
It certainly is.
And then you get down, and then you get to the radio access network, and you get this little straw, right? So for the foreseeable future, the congestion in a RAN is going to be the bottleneck in user experience. 85 to 90% of the global population gets their primary information and internet access through a mobile phone. which is what makes these operators so
Yeah.
incredibly important domestically as like part of the growth of their GDP, but also from a national security point of view, right? So, and now we actually talked a little bit yesterday, and I'll tie this into the pod we did yesterday with Tom Rondeau,
Indeed.
at the Pentagon, and they talked about how the entire nature of warfighting has changed. Everything's over the horizon. All of command and control has gone to communications, right? And the implications of drone management,
more autonomous stuff, yeah.
just what's proving out in the Ukraine battle with Russia is proving that sensing and communication is critical, right? So that's what's driving all this buzz about ISAC. So I think you're going to see cellular operators saying, look, no matter what I get for capacity, I want more. No matter how much spectrum I have, I want more, right? And no matter how efficient networks are, I want more, right? And so if I were an operator, I would welcome innovators that are pushing on those issues. And what's great is that Vodafone and Bell are helping us, right? As I said, we couldn't do this without help because the supply chain is struggling enough by itself, just rendering what it can do and maintaining its marginal profitability. Right? And I say that respectfully. These are the greatest companies in the wireless industry, left standing after the meltdown of 2000 and still doing their very best, but struggling against the state sponsorship of China.
Yeah.
We need to bring massive R&D budgets, massively disruptive innovation, and drive to cloud economics. Right?
Fair enough.
And that's where I see us driving. And these two operators, along with some folks in the U.S., along with some folks over in Asia, are going to drive that. And Cohere just wants. Look, Cohere is on the. We believe we're close to commercializing. We'll find out with Vodafone and Bell whether we make that transition this calendar year or next calendar year.
Give us the scoop when you make that decision, will you? Not him, only me.
Well,
Don't tell him.
at some point in time, the pain of same is less than the pain of change, right? That's what
Yeah.
makes people change.
Yeah.
But
right?
but you have to reach that. Using the pain analogy, it has to be painful enough to make you change.
Well, there's congestion and economic stress everywhere in the wireless industry, right? And usage just keeps growing.
Yeah.
So we need to mature enough to lower the pain of implementing Cohere
Yeah.
into one of multiple existing RAN players, and then we need to federate that beyond that one into everyone. And we need to get more fully integrated. We need to open the door to cloud economics for those that want to go that way. We need to open the door to full integration for those that want to go that way. And then I want to talk a little bit about 6G, if I could, because we've got maybe 15 minutes left.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I mean, I can see why you talk about it like the first domino falls, it triggers a lot, because I guess if this does get rolled out by these guys or somebody else and it does what it says on the tin, it's like a 50% improvement. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, everybody then is going to be thinking, well, we aren't going to be competitive anymore unless we
Right.
adapt.
And the opposite of that is true too. If we deliver our USM and it doesn't make a difference, you'll say Cohere who, right? Because it will make a difference. We don't expect to be deployed in a Bell network if we don't add value to Bell. All right.
Yeah.
But if we add value to Bell, I dare any vendor to refuse to add that value to Bell because they'll be designed out of the network. And that's not a hostile statement to make. It's just, this is the survival of the fittest game. This is like, users keep using more internet access all the time, right? So this is just run and never stop running, whether you're an operator or you're a supplier or anyone else, regulator. Now look at 6G. 6G is going to be determined, this technology is going to be determined by a body called 3GPP.
Yeah.
It is both a technically adept body and a highly political body, if you don't mind me saying so. Here's what we're going to do. We've introduced this word called pulsone. It's a
Yeah.
trademark that we filed for several years ago. And we call it a pulsone because it is both a pulse and a tone in a single waveform. It is indeed the mother waveform. It's fully programmable. You can program it to TDMA or FDMA, depending on whether you're trying to solve delay or Doppler. You can program it to 4G, LTE. You can program it to 5G and R. And frankly, no matter what comes out of 3GPP for 6G, we'll form it with a pulsone. So the pulsone is already 3GPP compliant for 6G. Now, we're going to suggest the design parameters that we plan to set should be standardized. I'm not even sure if that's in our best interest, to be honest, because since we can render whatever we want, just like the USM, if it doesn't matter, it will never see the light of day.
Yeah.
If it matters, it'll be deployed broadly. It's time to get beyond like the politics of 3GPP and say, only deploy what makes operators more profitable so that they can make customers more satisfied.
Well,
And so our pulse zone does that.
Yeah.
It grew out of radar, which is why it's a pulse.
yeah,
It communicates over the top of it, which is why it's a tone. And it can't stop sensing, which is why it does integrated sensing and communication naturally.
yeah.
It can't not do ISAC.
So we're not quite sure how we're going to tie the two together, but a lot of our conversation yesterday from the pub was about the ISAC side of things. But I wanted to ask the operator, especially Brad, because I know you've got to go in about 10 minutes or something. Since Ray brought up 6G, I've got to admit I've been a bit of a skeptic of it, just as like 5G in terms of the reality matching the hype at the time was a bit of a disappointment, and I'm very happy for you guys to correct me if you think that's a mistaken impression. And I think there's a danger if we let the marketing people get too carried away for 6G that gets overhyped and it's another letdown. But starting with you, Brad, as you've got the shortest amount of time, what are you looking forward to in 6G? Do you think it's going to be hyped? Do you think that it's going to justify the hype? Just give us a operator's view of that.
Well, I think if you look at it from an AI perspective, if we move towards an AI native type landscape, and I'm seeing kind of three camps there. There's groups of people who believe in AI nativeness, having that AI in the fabric, baked in. And there's the camp that's AI is an add-on, to exist in the cloud, kind of far away. And then there's a camp that's looking at 6G as a grand simplification. How do we just drive 6G to the simplest, most cost-effective standard and architecture that we can get? For me, I think the most value will come from an AI nativeness approach, right? Just the explosion in AI that we're seeing from our users. This is kind of the natural place to be. We can push this all the way through the fabric of the network and use AI wherever it best suits the need. So I'm looking forward to that. But at the same time, doing a large hardware upgrade, which, could cost exorbitant amounts of money, is something we're, not very keen to go down that path.
From my very inexpert point of view, I just can't even see what the purpose of it would be. I'm not sure, notwithstanding the stuff that Ray's been talking about, what the technological driver for a massive hardware refresh would be, but maybe I'm missing something. But the same question to you, Paco.
Yeah, no, I would agree with Brad on the concerns about massive upgrades. But certainly, 6G will come with whatever form it has. We are focused now on a 5G advance as well, try to deploy what's coming. But it's true that some of the technologies that are happening now, starting to happen, also satellite, will probably be fully integrated and fully optimized when we get to 6G. By the way, satellite is an area where your solution can also be of help. Because of the nature of how satellites move.
Do you find the ISAC side of 6G, because we talked about it from a sort of how it might be used by defence groups, but from a sort of telco perspective, that to me is one standout thing that sounds quite different from what you've had with 4G and 5G. But is it at all interesting to operators and see yourself doing things with it?
Yeah, being able to localize much more accurately than we can today is
that was a
the
PA
revenue
going mad.
The revenue potential from this is potentially very large, right? Like being able to get more out of just the inherent wireless network without having to add in tons of other, Do
you have any ideas of specific use cases? I'm not going to use the word killer app, although I just did. But specific use cases of how ISAC could generate new revenue.
Well, if you look at things like autonomous vehicles or autonomous drones, these types of things, having that ability to very precisely localize where that drone is could come with a lot of value, right? Instead of broadly knowing within 100-meter radius where that thing is, exactly where it is. It can come with a lot of benefits. Yeah.
Industrial automation being the killer app for enterprise. You can do a lot of automation in an industry, but once you can sense all the RF environment, which is extremely dynamic in a robotic plant.
Yeah.
Robots get all of their situational awareness over the air.
Yes.
So I'm guessing the ISAC conversation is not this is going on at a 6G level, and it wouldn't be, there'd be people who are not from the OTFS sort of community who are talking about this as well.
There are people that think sensing is the next frontier and we're going to try to integrate it. They come from an incumbent point of view and they're thinking they'll bolt it on, they'll modify OFDM to do some chirps. The way I look at that, more
That's the
broadly-
expression, is it? Chirp?
Yeah. Actually, it's a technical term in the radar industry. There are chirp
It
is
sounds like a technical term.
no, it is. So what I would liken that to, and this may sound cynical and it's intended to be, right, is that from the telco point of view, there's a lot of folks that thought, oh, ISDN, if there's going to be a data network, let's do 2B plus D and see if there's a data network. And the IP guys just went, there's a data network, I'm going to go make it happen, right? So we're going to go make integrated sensing and communication happen. And some folks are going to see if sensing is important by bolting it on, and they're going to come up with kludgy things. Now, there are ways that you can optimize OFDM to do some sensing, but what's going to happen is people are going to realize there are dimensions of sensing, like, hey, not just can you localize a drone, but how many drones? They come in swarms.
Indeed.
Can you tell the difference between a drone and a bird? Resolution matters, right?
Right.
Can you do low resolution sensing, high resolution sensing? If so, how much of the data plane do you take when you do that? Do you do it for free? What we demonstrated last week is that we rendered a video session on OTFS in partnership with NVIDIA and Lockheed Martin, and we only did that video session so that people could say, okay, there's something happening in the radio network. Otherwise, it's like, what's happening, right? So while that video was going through, we used the data in the video session to generate our sensing.
Right.
And we generated an image of the environment using the throughput, not by creating another swim lane for sensing, but by using the underlying data plane as a sensor as well. So every element in the network is both sensing and communication in OTFS. In other networks, you'll either have sensing elements or data elements.
Right.
So this is a fastball up the middle to us. Now, it came out of the Defense Department because everything's evolved into drone management. Warfare is that way. They run mobile ad hoc networks in the battlefield. They communicate to space. They communicate to AWACS platforms. So they're used to this environment, and they need to integrate sensing and communication, and they have radar solutions and they have comm solutions, and they're trying to find one that does them together. And Cohere, as a result, has become very strategic to our U.S. national security organizations, and that's why we met with Tom and had that discussion yesterday. What we're saying is, if OTFS solves anything that comes out of 3GPP and at least allows the global defense industry to solve their problem, then we will have accomplished our mission. But if it also localizes users down to less than a meter, if it also automates every industry that's going robotics, this is the mother waveform, right?
So before you ask another question, I want to give Brad a chance to clear off if he needs to, because I know you've got to prepare for something else.
I do have to run.
Yeah, yes. I mean, if you've got any last thoughts other than that, I just want to say thanks a lot. It's great to have your insight here.
I would just say, thank you to Cohere. The work we're doing and the innovation is very exciting. So hoping to see this come to fruition soon, and we're working really hard. So thank you, Rick. Thank you guys for having me.
All right, cheers. You're all right to stick around for a few more minutes, Paco?
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
Paco, you can
move.
So now we're going to get the deal done here. No, so I just shook hands with Brad. That was a purchase order handshake. Did you do that?
I don't know if Brad realised that. So what were you going to ask Ian?
I was just going to say, because the 6G standardization process is still going on, and presumably you're seeing that echo. But is there a sort of appetite for having OTFS be part of that and become some kind of alternative that could be used?
There's a question.
This is a tricky question. No, I think obviously standardization is a process and it takes time.
Yeah.
I think it's not first time that this is discussed. So 5G happened as well. I think this time everybody has more experience, and I think Cohere hopefully will find a way to be there.
I'll take you off the hook on this one, Paco. This is a tough one for operators dealing in the standards bodies, because they want very much to sponsor disruption, but standards standards aren't disruptive because they're standards, right?
Yeah.
So it's literally the opposite mindset that comes. It doesn't mean anyone's dumb, okay? It just means they tend to seek lowest common denominator. They drive down the cost structure. Industries like defense operate at the edges of performance requirements.
Yeah.
Industries like cellular operate in the mainstream of those performance requirements, okay? And they work with what they have, and generally speaking, they iterate as opposed to, revolutionize things, okay? So we've talked to companies like Vodafone and others who said to the operators, look, we'll play nice in the sandbox. We'll introduce our OTFS capabilities. We'll demonstrate them through simulations. We'll demonstrate them through proofs of concept. And no matter what happens in 3GPP, we promise to do whatever the outcome of 3GPP is, because that's what an operator wants. But by the way, in your interest is for us to keep innovating, because God forbid we find something beyond what 3GPP settled on. We'll be able to bring that to you with the same OTFS waveform. So they then say, great, good luck, we support you, but it's not our fight to fight. And it's not a fight, by the way. But I mean, at the end of the day, some folks see it that way. But we're going to bring innovation to the industry. And now people have said, wait a minute, is this based on the same principles of USM? Well, I saw that work. So you guys start on second base. So like, whereas 10 years ago, you start as a newcomer, now you start as a trusted supplier that I'm wondering if you have as much impact on layer 1 as you did on layer 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And we say we do. And then we show it through simulations, and then we show it through proofs of concept. And then we'll probably show it first commercially with a defense industry application, because they have the greatest use. You've probably seen a lot of hype around the Golden Dome. You've seen a lot of hype around what the US and its allies are doing with regard to NATO spend. And a lot of that spend is going to end up in communications. And so we're just going to bring our innovation to marketplace. And we think it'll definitely have implications on defense, where things go far too fast in Doppler and they're transmitting far too far away in space. But Paco was nice enough to comment that, Vodafone's one of the earliest and largest investors in AST Space Mobile. And I know he's smiling because they've done 100x on their initial investment.
All right, congratulations.
Which is always nice. So hopefully you'll always invest at 100x, Paco, right?
Is that a promise? Is that another deal that's just been made?
No, just a slight reference. But Paco has been intuitive enough to say, wait a minute, if you resolve delay spread and Doppler spread, and we're partnered with AST Space Mobile, who's transmitting far away from here, meaning delay, at 25,000 miles an hour in orbit, meaning high Doppler, and you can resolve things that are moving at far less speeds, at far less delays on Earth, shouldn't you be able to do beamforming and massive MIMO in space? And the answer to that is, of course we can. We've got a lot of work to do in order to commercialize that. I'm not here to announce anything, but we're going to work very hard to move this industry from integrating direct to phone at a SOS message or text message to fully integrating direct to phone profitably through the space industry.
Right.
And that's why you invested there, is like not just to do a couple of, in the Grand Canyon, we can connect you with a text message, but they want to fully integrate the non-terrestrial networks with the terrestrial networks and create a seamless fabric of continuous communication.
So we've only got about 10 minutes left, I think, before everyone's got even more important things to do than be on the Telecoms.com podcast. And I just thought we normally, when we do a podcast from the studio, we normally, even when we have a guest, we talk about other news. And the other big news of this week, we've actually touched on several times over the course of this conversation, but I just thought it'd be good to spend the last 10 minutes talking about it. And I might ask you first, Ian, is this big announcement. It's kind of a dual announcement. It was the announcement that NVIDIA's investing $1 billion in Nokia. And Nokia, I don't know how directly transactional it was. It felt pretty transactional. Is kind of in return going all in, or at least a lot more overtly committed to AI RAN and some of the stuff we were talking about earlier with the.
I think it's completely transactional.
It's completely. Well, there we are. I was going to pass it to you anyway. What's your top line take on that development?
I mean, I can see why they've both done it, and I think Nokia needed some kind of revival story because there were concerns about the mobile networks business group. It's not been profitable, I think, and the setbacks they've had in the US have made it quite difficult for them to keep investing, I suppose, and matching someone like Ericsson on R&D. So I think they needed some kind of revival story. If they've got NVIDIA there is, I think now second biggest shareholder with 3%. I think it makes it the second biggest shareholder. And it's obviously trying to shape the strategy that Nokia does. It has its own kind of AI RAN.
Well, it's definitely got a seat at the table now.
We've talked about a bit on this idea of using GPUs in the radio access network to some extent. They'd talked about this for a couple of years, but they haven't really had any. But what they need is the big kit vendors kind of getting behind the vision.
Yeah.
So for them, it's kind of a no-brainer because $1 billion for Nvidia is pocket change, yeah. And I guess Nokia needed the revival story. So I get it from their perspective. I mean, my concern would be whether the telcos are, how they're thinking about this idea of putting GPUs into the cell edge, because I hear some skepticism there. But, yeah.
I'll take the opposite side on this. And one, I'll just say, if they had announced it without the $1 billion investment, I think you would have considered it to be empty.
Yeah.
So the reward for making sure it's not empty is you call it transaction. So like at the end of the day, you would have been skeptical no matter what they did, with or without an investment.
Yeah.
So I'll take the other side and say, I think this was transformational. I think we're going to look back on that announcement as the beginning of returning wireless to becoming investable again. I've said the wireless category is uninvestable, not to be controversial, but because show me someone in the space that's been consistently, significantly profitable.
Yeah.
And I'll compare that to, say, for example, the cloud service providers that have been consistently profitable for 8 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of controversy over whether that means they're going to stuff a bunch of GPUs into the edge. They're not going to do that. Vodafone's not going to let them, right? Unless it makes sense for Vodafone.
Yeah.
Right.
They can't just deliver a fait accompli and go, you're having it whether you like it or
Whether they're
not.
going to move workloads to the cloud, well, that's going to require fiber-based connectivity, and that's not everywhere.
Yeah.
But this is the beginning of that journey. And I don't look at the $1 billion investment as transactional, although it is, of course. It's empowering.
Yeah.
Right? It's putting your money where your mouth is. And yes, it's small, but that's because they're so big.
Yeah.
Would you like it to have been half their market cap? If NVIDIA put $1 billion in and only generated $1 billion of cash flow, it might have been considered reckless. We were at an event where they said $500 billion of next year's commit is already in bookings at like 70% cash flow margins. So if you're going to generate $350 billion of cash next year, you might as well do something with your cash. And this is one of the things to do. So, and if they had put $2 billion in, people would have said, wow, Nokia must have been desperate.
Yeah.
Right? So like there was no answer that would have made you happy. Right.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is,
you know too well.
So what I'm saying is, watch what happens from here. Don't just look at the announcement, which you would have considered cynically anyway. Watch what happens from here. Watch the workloads move to cloud. Watch AI get driven. Watch the stack change within a year.
Right.
All right. And follow the operators, right? Because if the operators don't buy that press release,
Indeed.
it won't go anywhere.
Well, I
At
mean,
the
so
end of the
that's-
day, I'll hand it off to Paco,
Yeah, well,
who can finish the answer.
No,
Well, and I was going to say, Paco, by the way, because of your flight delay, I wasn't able to give you my normal spiel that I tell my guests, which is if there's anything that's a bit too delicate for you to confront head on, then feel free to swerve it. But I'd be fascinated to know, whatever you're comfortable talking about, what you made of that announcement and what the implications are for the industry.
Well, I think for the industry is fantastic news. Having a company like NVIDIA investing in networks and radio again shows a lot and says a lot about not the move itself, but the opportunity that lies beyond that. But for us as operators, obviously we'll do what makes sense.
Yeah.
So things like what is the cost of this? It will be very important.
Of course.
Things that like the use cases, what are the use cases? We need to see a business case. We need to make this good for our customers. So that will be the main decision point. But I think this opens more flexibility, more opportunities. Is making the industry more attractive. I think it's good news.
So it gets a thumbs up from the operator side.
I think a lot depends on what T-Mobile does, I guess, with it really next year, because they're the kind of the early example, the telco that said they're quite interested in.
Yeah, they were
taking
part of the press
advantage
release, weren't they?
Press release. And,
On our case, I mean, we are interested. We joined AI RAN Alliance already last year. We are looking into this, but again, we'll do what makes sense.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we are no. Right?
Yeah.
I was reading some of the comments. I think John Saul got interviewed by one of our competitors, FYUZ, about where he sees all this. But he kind of framed it in a similar way to you, Ray. It's like you've got to think quite ambitiously about what the future brings. And people can sort of stumble over that. You're saying I'm quite skeptical, cynical about the the cost side of it.
I was being kind.
But I guess you've got to be able to sort of look beyond that and think about things in a slightly kind of bigger picture way, and that's what he's.
Well, I think Nokia's being led by a new leadership team, as well as a number of members that have been there a while, and a new leadership team generally looks and says, do I want change or do I not want change? And I just think this industry desperately needs change, right?
Yeah, I think that's hard to argue
The
with.
operators in various parts of the world are marginally profitable. In some parts of the world, they're struggling. The supply chain is universally struggling, even though they may have a quarter or two. By the way, Nokia's last quarter was the best quarter they've had in a long time.
Yeah.
So they're working their way out of the hole that they were in. They're fighting for share. They're in a comeback mode right now, and nothing clarifies your mind like a lack of options.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're looking for someone to make change happen in this industry, look for companies that you may think of as fragile, and they're going to go all in.
Yeah, I guess
NVIDIA's
the
going to go
nice
all
thing
in.
is having that optical and IP side of things, where the impacts of AI and needing connectivity between data centers is already kind of.
And so here's what I'd like you to imagine: a world where our USM scales both down to a base station, so that some apps that have hyper low sensitivity to latency can be managed locally, where the vast majority of the data plane is scheduled from the cloud, all of which is done in partnership with companies like Nokia and others, and runs on GPUs, at least in the cloud and potentially on the edge, depending on whether or not Nokia or NVIDIA can drive their cost structure down to the objectives of companies like Vodafone at the edge. If not, you'll see CPUs at the edge in partnership with GPUs in the core.
Yep.
But definitely the control plane of wireless is shifting.
Yeah.
It's being extracted like a lobotomy from the base station. It's going to run over a microservices architecture like a cloud ran. And whether that happens in 1 year or 5 years, it's happening, guys. And NVIDIA just basically said, that's over. We're making it happen. We're all in. And here's $1 billion to prove it.
And I thought one thing I took away from it, we're gonna wrap up in a minute. When Justin Hotar was appointed, he didn't come from a telecoms background. He came from an IT and data center and I guess AI background. And then one of the people on the call, the briefings that Ian and I both had separately, is a new Nokia exec who also worked with Justin, and she's been brought in. What's her name again, Ian?
Pallavi Mahajan.
Yeah, we are. Well done. You're much better at getting the names right. And I just thought, oh, okay, so this really is one of the biggest vendors in our space, is now having a hell of a lot of its strategy and its thinking and its forward progress dictated by people who come from quite a different direction. So I thought that was an interesting part of it.
One of you, I'm not sure which, asked Pallavi, what is the use case that's going to move first into this new architecture? And she said,
Yeah.
beamforming and scheduling.
Yeah.
Guess what we do, guys? Okay. All right. So I love where this is going. I love why it's going there. It's not because of the $1 billion. It's not like, hey, we make too much cash, let's throw some away. No,
I'll have some, Jensen.
let's inject some into an industry desperately needing radical change now. Let's inject a shitload now. That's what the technical term for $1 billion is, a shitload.
So that's the threshold, isn't
And
it,
then
for a shitload?
put another shitload in later if we need to, because we need this change now. We need it for the imperative of global wireless leadership returning to trusted Western vendors who need to compete with a state-sponsored program out of China. Okay, and we need to drive 6G and 5G right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that feels like a good note on which to end it, because we're pretty much at time anyway. Unless anyone's got any sort of last thoughts, I'll just wrap it up there. Thank you very much for rushing from the airport to join us, Paco. Much appreciated. And thanks for inviting us here, Ray, and for your fascinating insights. And maybe we'll have another cheeky drink.
It's a journey. It's a journey. It's not for the faint of heart, but we're looking forward to driving change in the wireless industry.
Okay. And I should say, I alluded to it once or twice earlier. We did do an audio recording, which we may well lead on to after this. So take this as your transition onto the audio recording that we did in the pub
You'll
with
find
Tom yesterday.
fascinating discussions with Tom Rondeau, who will take you through the history of mapping the electromagnetic field, all the way through Marconi and Hertz and Tesla, and tell you story after story of why the world's going to change.
Tom Rondeau is such a scientist that he's literally got equations tattooed on his arms. So that's all you need to know about him.
It goes beyond the arms, but I'll just leave it at that.
We'll just leave it there. Okay, brilliant. Okay, I will now wrap it up. Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the Telecoms.com podcast. recorded in the Stag's Head pub in Dublin. What are we doing in Dublin, I hear you ask, audience? Well, we're here as guests of Cohere, who we've had on the pod before, and we've got Ray from Cohere again. Some of you might be wondering why you can't see this pub. It's because we're doing this on a Sunday and Pierre's not here with the cameras, so we're just doing it with the audio. But I'm delighted to have Ray here. And then just by pure coincidence, while we're just hanging around at the bar drinking a Guinness, we bumped into Tom, who in his day job is a next generation wireless expert at the US Department of Defense, but right here is just on holiday having a laugh in Dublin. But you decided to join this podcast. Thanks a lot, Tom.
Hey, happy to be here. This is great.
All right. So Ray, why are we here in Dublin? What are we talking about?
So we've got a FYUZ conference where we'll look into 5G and how it's evolving into 6G. And we're here in the pub mostly to drink a pint, to have some fun. And it's great to be here with Dr. Tom Rondeau.
Doctor, sorry, Tom.
Yeah, and Tom's been leading not only the defense piece, but the commercial piece as well. There's a convergence that's going on right now between the commercial efforts in the commercial cellular networks, 5G and 6G, and what the Defense Department in the US and our allies need from the standpoint of what the warfighter is looking for, as the whole entire nature of defense and war is becoming much more communication enabled over the horizon. And as those all evolve, Tom will talk about his role, but he's driving the convergence, if you will, between what the communication needs of the defense industry are with what the capabilities of the commercial cellular networks are.
Yeah, so Tom, I mean, I'm totally out of my depth on this, but then I so often am on the podcast, so this is nothing new for me. But obviously I watch and listen to the news. Obviously comms are a more intrinsic part of military stuff than they ever used to be. Can you just give us an intro into how that situation is evolving?
Yeah, so maybe a bit of background on myself. Again, my day job is with the Department of Defense, running the Future Generation Wireless Technologies research group at we call OUSD R&E, so the Undersecretary of Defense or Undersecretary of War for Research and Engineering. Prior to this, though, just to some background here, I spent over 6 years as a DARPA program manager, so Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, building the new technologies for advanced radios, phased arrays, signal processing devices, all those things. Prior to that, I was actually the lead developer for a thing called GNU Radio, so GNU Radio, which is an open source software platform for signal processing and for accessing the spectrum. So if you think about the history of this stuff, there's four fundamental forces of the universe as we know them. The weak and strong nuclear forces, gravity, and electromagnetics. And so we've, over the past just over 100 years, have figured out how to manipulate the electromagnetic force and with Maxwell's equations. And my whole job is, how do I program systems to manipulate that electromagnetic force? So we get to program the EM spectrum, which is a super cool idea. So that got me into DARPA, building the things, the next generation technologies, and then into the Pentagon to try to figure out, okay, how do we really make this relevant for the warfighter? But what I realized from all of that was the importance of the commercial technologies and their developments over the past few years, really 30 years of going from the bespoke Defense Department capabilities that we spent a lot of money on into Wi-Fi and GSM 2G technologies. That led the way to a massive revolution in how we commercialize this technology and the speed with which it goes. And then come into decades later going, well, how do we actually then take advantage of this advancement in commercial technologies to make it more relevant to the Defense Department and our warfighters, and make sure that they know what they're doing. So here I am, just in my one of my favorite cities in the world, Dublin, having done my postdoc here at Trinity College Dublin, and coming back to one of my favorite pubs in Dublin, the Stag's Head, to hang out with you guys, just to figure out how do we message this to the rest of the world, how important communications is, because decision superiority and making sure information gets to the right people at the right time, and with truth and accuracy, to make the best decisions that we can make. That's been what I've been trying to do for my entire career.
I'll chip in because I mean, Scott and I go to a lot of events at MWC, and I think we've both been sort of covering telecom for a long time.
FYUZ.
No, I haven't mentioned FYUZ, but I guess the main thing that we're always focused on is, as you were saying, Tom, is the Gs used in commercial networks for consumers. And I think there's a bit of a changing conversation over the last year or so where you go to a Nokia event or an Ericsson event, and all of a sudden they're showing off these backpacks with antennas, and it's a core network in a backpack, and there's more and more focus on like wireless communications and 5G and potentially 6G being used in a military context. And it's almost like, I don't know, because I've never covered the defense sector that much, it's almost like the two things have been parallel, but they're now converging. Is that accurate? I mean, have they been doing their own sort of thing and all of a sudden it's coming a little bit back to where, the mainstream's been? Or
Yeah, so again, back in my history, again, thinking about what this technology means to the battlefield, to warfighters, and to just defense in general. Like these concepts are so intertwined, and they always have been. But we've invented the things that we needed to invent for the department for like 100 years, going back like way back into World War I. When we first started to weaponize the idea of RF and communications. Well, actually, even before that, communications has been one of the tenets of all warfighting.
I'm gonna butt in quickly. I was just listening to a podcast called The Rest is History, and they were talking about Nelson and Battle of Trafalgar.
Yeah.
And they were using flags to communicate them.
Absolutely. So you think flags? You think actually... On the flight over to Dublin, I was actually just rewatching Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King,
Cool.
and they light those fires, right?
Yeah, exactly, the beacons.
Right. What is a beacon fire? It's a binary system. It's a 0 or a 1. It's on or it's off. We've been doing that for millennia, just trying to communicate to each other. Smoke signals. Actually, if you think the book James Gleick, if you really want to know my world, read the book Information by James Gleick. And it goes back to the drum talkers of Africa. Like he starts off with that,
right,
about how to actually use basic signaling to communicate over long distances. We've now managed to control the electromagnetic fields in order to move information at a much more relevant and much more in-depth pace than we've ever had.
And we take so much of that for granted now. I mean, all our day jobs concerns telecoms, but you think of it even versus 20 years ago. How ubiquitous, like, I've got a joke. It's a second, I've got a thing going on where I have to gift data to my kids. And at the start of the month, I always forget, and they always send me one. And now they're just like, as soon as they run out of data, that's their biggest thing. So it's just so ubiquitous now, but it's only been over the last decade or two.
Yep. Yeah, and so when we go out, like what we call downrange, right? When you actually like operate in a warfighting scenario, or even like what we call phase 0 or gray zone warfare, these types of things are where you're not in actually active conflict, but the dangers of being present are there. And so how do you manage your presence? How do you manage your we call it the like operational perspective of who you are? How do you control what you do in that space?
Yeah.
That is ripe for everything that we do in our and our management of of ourselves, of the signals that we emit around us, and what we look like on the network.
Well,
it's all relevant.
Well, was there a sense though that the kind of military side, the defense side, even though some of these technologies came out of that originally, that they'd sort of slightly fallen behind in terms of taking advantage of something? I think I remember Tommy Wheater at Nokia, and he was saying it at a public forum, but he was saying that the systems we're upgrading now, when we go in and take 4G and 5G into them, they're on sort of old 2G technologies, some of the NATO systems that we see, and the difference we can make in terms of spectral efficiency and what we can do for them is quite staggering. And
yeah, so I've been talking about this for decades now, that the when commercial industry figures out how to make money off of something, there's no stopping them. There's so much more money that commercial industry can pour into something than the Defense Department can.
Yeah.
We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars of R&D per year globally into this type of technology. The Defense Department will only ever spend, everyone thinks the Defense Department has like so much
Does spend
money.
quite a lot of money,
It does spend quite a lot of money on things that make a difference in our deterrence posture and our warfighting posture. But when you actually look at the amount of money we spend, it actually pales in comparison to what industry can spend. Once they learn that, they figure out how to just drive forward and create opportunities. And that's why I would say back to the 90s when Wi-Fi, when unlicensed spectrum came out and Wi-Fi was created as an industry, when 2G as GSM came out, that turned the tide of where the revenue was going to be pouring into technologies. And we've now really kind of recognized that. And the advancements that have been coming in every generation since 2G, 3G, 4G, now 5G. And frankly, we're now working on 6G, right? Yeah. Which is not well understood in the rest of the world. It's not that these generations come into they don't just happen, right? These are thousands of people working diligently every day to try to figure out what the next generation technology looks like. And so we're a part of that because there's no stopping that from happening. And most of the work that the department has to do, if you look at warfighting, like let's just look at Ukraine, right? The change of Ukraine from tactical radios to using the cellular networks was a necessary move for them to protect themselves. So they're fighting over these.
There's been a lot of innovation there, hasn't there?
Total. I mean, it's been insane to watch how fast they've learned that these are the ways that they're going to protect themselves. And how they're going to actually
just in terms of taking advantage of the capabilities that cellular had compared with what they were doing before.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, the idea of using the electromagnetic fields, the electromagnetic force, what we look at it as a spectrum, right? It's from, I always love this, we call it high frequency. High frequency is between 3 and 30 megahertz, right? It's actually hard to go that low in frequency. It's a very specialized field right now, but we call it high frequency because when it was first defined, it was so hard to do.
And then you get VHF and UHF and all that. Yeah.
And then you start running out of superlatives to put along it. So extremely high frequency.
Properly high.
Can I set Ray up because we're here with Cohere obviously, and it's like what's the kind of meeting point between Cohere potentially and what defense might be doing? And I guess a lot of listeners wouldn't. We've written about Cohere, and I think we had you on one of the podcasts before in terms of how that system might be used by a commercial network, and you've done tests with Vodafone. But why is that of any interest at all to defense?
Yeah. So thanks, Ian. So Tom described well from tom-toms and smoke signals to conquering the electromagnetic field and using it to our advantage. There's just a very rich opportunity now for the cellular industry to contribute to warfighter capabilities. There's an expression that any warfighter knows called situational awareness. Tom links it to decision making, which at the end of the day, prosecuting war is all about decision making at very, very high speeds under tremendous risk, and you got to get it right. So situational awareness comes from like knowing what's around you. And back in the day when you did that with smoke signals, they didn't move that fast, but now things are moving at hypersonic speeds. They're being observed from orbit and space. They're being launched at hypersonic speeds from hostile territories, and they're crossing the planet in a matter of minutes, right? So decision making is now under tremendous challenge. So situational awareness is something that's now coming to the cellular industries through what they call ISAC. It stands for technically integrated sensing and communication. I think of it as improving situational awareness using cellular. So I know that's a little cheeky, but we're saying that often because fundamentally, when you sense the environment, you're becoming aware of the situation around you. And if we can improve the SA for the warfighter, we can improve their decision making, and that changes the odds in the battlefield. Now, so how do you do sensing and how do you do communication? Radar technologies have generally been associated with sensing, where you might ping or pulse or even passively listen to other pulses that are reflecting, and it tells you what's in this room. All right. Communication is generally done on a tone. When you put a tone and a pulse together, and we'll talk about this in other settings, you get a pulse tone. That's where Cohere comes in.
So Cohere has been working with Tom and his team, as well as others in the industry, trying to drive 6G to a place that integrates sensing and communication naturally. And if we can do that right, it will not only meet the needs of the traditional cellular market, it'll meet the needs of the warfighter as well.
And so let me explain like why we're excited about what Cohere is doing. And there's other technologies out there that we're looking at, not quite like Cohere, but in different areas where, when you think about the transition from a hardware-based radio system, which is what we invented back in the 1890s into the Marconi days in the early 20th century, they were all hardware-based. They're all focused on how do you actually access the spectrum and try to optimize that. What we did, back to my GNU radio days, software-defined radio. This is, again, programming the electromagnetic spectrum. We unlocked a significant part of electromagnetics by just being able to use computational power to program how we access that. That was a game changer. And what we did initially was we just copied how we did things in hardware and software. And then as we were working on this, we started that eureka moment of, it doesn't have to just be how we did things in the past. Let's look back at the communications theory. Let's look back at the original math of the problem. And now all we're limited by is computational numbers. How can we compute things most effectively? What Cohere has been able to do, as well as a few other companies in this world, is just think about this from how do we take advantage of microprocessing, access to spectrum, and access to these fields, and program them in a way that is more effective to information dominance. That's really what this is all about, and how we control the system.
So that they have, and we've chatted about this with Ray before, but they have a waveform called OTFS. I guess everything up to this point, since the sort of 4G days, has been OFDM.
Yeah.
What's the, I mean, from your perspective, like in a military use, what's the attractions of that over OFDM?
Yeah, I mean, OFDM was a really incredible change in, again, how we manage the spectrum in terms of time and frequency division for different users, and how do you optimize the block of resources to different users and what it can do. But it was all about communications. It was all about just, all right, I got a cell tower and I've got a UE, a user equipment, which is your cell phone, your laptop, your tablet. How can I communicate that information to that device as effectively as possible? But it didn't really take into account the fact that the real world surrounds you. So it built in safeguards around the complexity of the world. What OTFS is doing is it's actually using that surrounding world in order to help you craft that message and craft that information control in order to broadcast to that particular user in the most effective way. So again, we're programming the system. We're using advancements in computer science, advancements in computational theory in general, in order to put that into devices that's going to allow us to more effectively use this resource. And by the way, the resource we're talking about, spectrum, is a massive economic beneficiary to everything that we do here. Everyone is after spectrum resources. So the more effectively you can use that, the better it is from an economics perspective, but also from a technical perspective to communicate between different users.
So just to amplify that point, there's, in today's world, being used for communication in traditional cellular, there's over $1 trillion US of value mark to market of spectrum in use. So if you can make a ding on that, you can make a ding on a very large asset. So Tom talked about prior generations using compute resources to address the challenges of the surrounding environment. OTFS turns the surrounding environment into an asset to be used to improve the communication. So the S is space. So it's orthogonal, time, frequency, and space. We took what was you're able to allocate based on time and frequency, and now you can also allocate based on space. So you can send one set of energy in that direction, another in another. He also talked about programmability, as opposed to just putting things in software, but doing them the way they used to be done. Now we put them in software so that you can differentiate how you want to do it. One of the things that is becoming more widely known now is that OTFS can render a 5G waveform in software. It can also render a 4G waveform in software. It'll render whatever comes out of 3GPP in software. We're proposing our version, and if our version is at least one of the standards that is chosen, then we'll become a 6G standard. If not, we'll render the standard in software, and we'll hold the 6G waveform that we're proposing. We'll render that as well in software. So you can imagine one of the challenges I think Tom and others in defense have is their use cases align with cellular, but almost always they supersede what cellular is going to design to. The 3GPP organizations are going to design to conventional use cases that exist in the real world today.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people travel at hypersonic speeds.
So this not being adopted by the 3GPP for 6G, if that was to happen, it wouldn't be something that would prevent it from being used by the military, or?
No, not at all. Because we can start programming these systems because everything. So, computing and communications are actually mathematically very similar. In fact, the transistor back, was invented in 1947, Bell Labs, and it was designed as a tool to amplify radio waves. So it's designed as a receiver device.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was as a receiver device to replace vacuum tubes and other nonlinear devices to just amplify the radio waves. It's very hard to use a transistor for that purpose. It's very niche knowledge that's required to do that. But because of Claude Shannon's other work on how to map Boolean algebra into switching devices, mechanical switches, when he did his master's thesis, they quickly realized, this transistor is just a switch, and it's you can start passing information along or you don't, based on electrical signaling. So that created the transistor computer. And what's fun is the first transistor-based computer and the first transistor radio both came out in 1953. But what happened after that was computing science realized the power of this reliable device to manipulate, again, computable numbers based on Boolean algebra. And then they just ran with it. They accelerated so fast. And the computing world that we know today is all based on that transistor device. So all of the work we've done, we were just at the NVIDIA GTC conference in DC, and they're now a $5 trillion company. The evaluation, $5 trillion. So
I think they just dipped below it. I think about.
They went back. Okay, all right.
Went to 100 billion.
Yeah.
Actually, you're talking real money.
But at least at one point, they were the first company to ever pass that $5 trillion mark based on the transistor concept. But this is a device that was used for radio initially. It was designed for radio. What we've done in software-defined radio is actually combine those two. So the core mathematics behind these two systems is actually fairly interrelated. And so how do we actually manipulate these two things? Cloud computing, right? It's impossible to not make money on cloud computing right now. I mean, maybe that'll stop, but right now, if you're
latest quarterlies confirm that.
Yeah. If you're going to make a data center, you're going to make money. But what's happening here is we have the same opportunity to make those things, to combine those systems to make a distributed computing and communication system work here. The ugly thing about radio, though, is you have this annoying thing called an antenna that converts between the analog devices and the analog waveforms and the computational digital processing of it. But once you can take advantage of that, once you can understand that whole system, you get to pull that into software and you get to program it. And what's great about what we're talking about here is you can start inventing ideas on top of the existing standards. And then you can start to move yourself around there because it's all just programming. So, all right, think about it this way. When you talk to a website, you go in your browser, you talk to a website, what you do is you negotiate what your encryption scheme is going to be, your cipher for how you actually encode that data. And you say, can you support this? And the website says, I can't. Okay, well, can you support this? The website says, yeah, I can support that. We could do the same thing in telecommunications, in communications theory. We have some systems that are based on OTFS, and we can say, hey, can you support this OTFS waveform? That's going to give us more information and a better processing. And the base station may come back and say, no, we can't do that. All right, fine, we'll fall back to the OFDM. We can do that too. So now it's all about manipulating what particular configuration we want based on what the system can do and based on what is right for the situation. And we don't have to wait for the standards to define that.
Yeah, I mean the software defined aspect of it sounds good, but I guess people in the telecom industry have heard that for a long time, and there's always hardware changes that seem to need to happen. You mentioned the antenna issue, but what does it take to kind of get this into, into a kind of not a commercial setting necessarily, but into a setting where we would see it being used for defense purposes? I mean, does it need some of these big organizations like Lockheed Martin to start like working with it and integrating it into their stuff, and how hard is that to make that happen?
It would be much better if Lockheed Martin did adopt all this into their system. And frankly, they are. I talk to them all the time. Them, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon. I don't want to I'm not going to discount any of the big defense industry primes that we work with. They're all tackling this concept. I mean, Lockheed, they really came out ahead of the pack by saying 5G.mil was a brand that they actually created and we're pushing towards. So yeah, if they start adopting this concept, then yeah, it's a much more effective approach to handling this challenge. Now, what I will say, back to this whole spectrum thing, right? This is it's an ocean of access. So the metaphor that I've often used is if we were to restrict our carrier strike groups into commercial shipping lanes, like let's say I'm trying to move a carrier strike group from the port of San Diego to the port of Manila Bay. And I'm only allowed to use commercial shipping lanes. Well, that's a pretty obvious place to attack.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We're not stupid. So the DoD moves those ships all around the Pacific Ocean. That's the spectrum that it's using in order to maneuver there. What's great about what's happening in the commercial sector is access to spectrum has increased. Commercial industry owns more spectrum, and they're going to continue to own more spectrum. In fact, if you look at the One Big Beautiful Bill, or I guess we're calling it the OB3 now, that has dictated that we're going to sell off 800 more megahertz of spectrum. So megahertz, if your audience, probably knows this stuff, yeah.
If they don't, they listen to the wrong goddamn podcast.
Right. So a significant chunk of spectrum is going to be sold off over the next 10 years from not only the Defense Department but also federal spectrum in general to be auctioned and useful for commercial communications uses. That is an opportunity for the Defense Department to figure out, hey, this is actually great because now we can buy commercial technology and access all this spectrum. So the antenna problem is being solved because these systems are going to be more adaptable, more useful, and then we can just start to again program them in the back end. Because all right, so if you look at the original construct of electromagnetic theory, it all goes back to Maxwell's equations. Maxwell's equations don't talk about frequency at all. There's no concept of frequency in those four equations. There's a time difference, sure, but it's not about frequency. It's about how you manipulate those waveforms, and by programming that's the power that we're talking about here.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I want to pick up on something you said, Ian, and it's skepticism, maybe even cynicism. The industry's been talking about this.
I'm never cynical.
The industry's been talking about this for decades, blah, blah, blah. We just came out of an AI conference, and in fact, Jensen Huang did a great job as the CEO of NVIDIA describing their journey, because a lot of people are wondering, like, where did this bubble come from? And I know you guys discussed whether this is a bubble or not. I think
a bubble.
I think you've come down squarely on it is a bubble. I'd like to maybe...
It's a bit bubbly.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that after this. But the point is, when I got out of college, people were talking about neural networks. This has been going on for 30, 40, 50 years. It really took the GPU and a series of other advancements to take this notion of a neural network, which has never really changed, to something that's massively scalable without distortion, enlarged, and the abilities of the compute networks to do orders of magnitude more compute faster. The reason I use that as an analogy is it feels like it happened overnight, but it really didn't. It happened through decades of setup. So what are the decades of setup here in telecom? The move to understanding not only the electromagnetic spectrum, but the move to virtualization, the softwareization of everything. And Tom talked about the difference between running something from hardware to software, but doing it the same way, to moving it to software in a fully programmable way. Now, when you move it to a fully programmable way, you get OTFS, right? OTFS is the mother waveform. It is both TDMA on one extreme and FDMA in another extreme. So that's why we're confident that whatever comes out of 6G will be able to render in our software, because since OTFS is the mother waveform, if we lose the politics, if you will, of the discussion in 6G. We'll just render the outcome in our software. And then what can happen is entities like not only the Defense Department, but think about the satellite networks, NTNs, which are obviously part of the global defense industry.
NTN, non-terrestrial networks.
The non-terrestrial networks. These networks address massive delay and delay spread, massive Doppler and Doppler spread. If you try to network satellites, you're seeing they're becoming extremely interesting to the cellular industry, but they're doing basically text messages because they're so challenged by the delay spread and the Doppler spread. Enter OTFS, which was born in the delay Doppler domain, and we can set those dimensions to create broadband connectivity to all those satellites.
Yeah.
So if in fact that's something that 3GPP wants to go after, then we'll probably have success with proposing OTFS to the standards bodies. If for any reason 3GPP chooses to do that with another solution, then we just think we'll win on the merits of our technology capabilities. And since it's a software solution anyway, OTFS will be in handsets, will be in networks doing 6G, and it'll have a superset of skills, a kryptonite, so to speak, that allows you to keep programming connectivity.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, and this goes beyond the military side of things, but I mean, we talked about the USM product for a long time, and the routes to the market there were, I think there was an XApp option for doing it, or direct integration with somebody's base station. But in terms of actually making OTFS widely available, you'd sort of have to get the guys that are producing the antenna equipment, the base station equipment, the military equipment sort of behind. Even if it wasn't in 6G, it would have to be appealing enough for those guys to say, we're going to back this.
Problem, Ian, right? So the problem of congestion's been around for a long time. Something that makes spectrum more valuable, that drives greater capacity on the existing assets, is a winner. It's taken us a few years to prove that, and then it's taken us another year to 18 months to integrate it into one of the largest players in the world. It'll be commercially deployed next year. We're very excited.
And Ray's right. This has to be a differentiating concept now. There's so much baked into RF and wireless communications now. Something that actually changes the game for the economics of the future and how it unlocks these resources. That's where we're at next. Can I have a quick intervention here?
Yeah, man.
So Ronnie,
Ray's colleague who was in the room when we last did the pod. Ronnie's gone and delivered. What have you delivered here, Ronnie?
Jameson custard,
right,
only
perfect.
available in Ireland.
So,
right, this is something like a subset of Jameson's, is it?
so
Oh, no, it's the level of Jameson.
all right.
It's the dog's bollocks Jameson's.
Cheers.
All right, so we'll cheers first, Slancha.
yeah, cheers.
Plancha.
Nice one.
And I have a quick story about Marconi.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, that's smooth.
All right, so I talked about Maxwell's equations earlier. I hope I get the dates right, but I believe it was 1893 when Heinrich Hertz first proved Maxwell's equations at Karlsruhe University in Germany. He showed it, and there was a question from the audience, probably apocryphal, but a question from the audience that said, Professor Hertz, what is this good for? And his response was, as far as I can tell, absolutely nothing. Within 5 years, Marconi had the first patent on wireless telegraphy. So Marconi, right, famously an Italian name, but what was Marconi's from his mother's line? Who was Marconi's grandfather?
I thought it was English.
John
English company.
John Jameson.
Oh, no way.
So we're drinking in honor of the origins of.
Well, do you know what? I'm just noticing we're getting to the part of the evening in this pub where the locals might want to actually be in the corner. They'd be very kind. They've let us have a whole corner of this lovely pub. And the locals are getting there. And I've got another reason to start to wrap up because the Guinness is catching up with me. But
Can I ask one thing before we wrap up though? Because
I've got another question. I'm not going to totally.
Because but the practical use of something like integrated sensing and communications, I guess, for someone who's not in that space and they're thinking, what exactly is this? Why does that interest defense groups? How would this be used? If you're explaining it, okay. If you're explaining it to my dad, say, why is this interesting and useful?
Situation awareness. Back to what Ray said earlier. How you actually understand the environment around you. What we normally do is we deploy very specific, very expensive systems to do the sensing around us. If we can actually rely on both our tactically deployable radio systems that are based on this technology that can actually supplement and therefore reduce supplement equipment and reduce the amount of equipment we may have deployed with our standard forces, with our expeditionary forces. They only have to take some things with them, and it'll actually provide multiple simultaneous systems around situation awareness and communications. That's a game changer as far as like I said, the weight of equipment, power, requirements, which translates into generators, batteries, fuel, all those things. That's an incredible advancement. Also, because as I always like to joke, the commercial cellular world has been so kind, out of the goodness of their hearts, to create a worldwide network of interconnected systems. What if we could tap into that? What if we can use those systems for our own purposes securely and effectively? Now all those signals become part of our ability to both communicate and to sense the world around us. I will also say that thinking about this from the global strategic position in the United States and our allies and partners around the world is, how do we drive innovation? How do we drive the next generation of economics, of markets? That's where we've kind of tapped out on that on our 4G system. 4G is a brilliant technology. 5G, when it came about, and I've told this to my telco friends in the United States. They know this too. They position 5G as, oh, this is going to be a game changer in communications and technology, and we're going to download high-def video to you in 8 seconds on your phone. And I looked at them and I said, no, you're not. Because Netflix won't serve it to you that fast. Like, we can actually...
And also, why do you need it?
And why do you need it, yeah. Now, there have been times I've been, like, getting on a plane going, oh, I want to download this thing, and I kind of want to do it right now. But it's a rare circumstance that you actually really need that.
Not a core use case.
Yeah. So they've kind of tapped out on their marketability of just broadband communication to the phone. We can talk to the towers faster than the towers can talk to the rest of the internet. So you got to figure out new ways of generating revenue and new ways of generating business. To prolong this a little bit, when I was at DARPA, we crafted like the 3 waves of artificial intelligence. Right? It was initially like expert systems. I programmed my workstation with an expert system, and it tells me answers that I probably already wanted to know. Now we're in this machine learning era, the deep learning era of communication. It's all about the cloud, and the cloud having all this information that it can give us, statistically relevant responses back to what we ask it. What's the next generation of AI? It's going to be about contextual learning about your environment and telling you what you need to know at the time you need to know it. None of this has happened without the dramatic changes in information and processing. So first generation AI came about because we had workstations that were available at our fingertips, literally at our fingertips, that could give us that response back. Machine learning and all this stuff with deep learning, that's all about access to the cloud, which came about because of the fiber optic interconnections that the core of the internet has been based on. But how do you actually pull that back to the human and the relevance to the person around you? That has to be based on wireless technologies. So all of this they're so interrelated that the next generation of AI and the next generation of cellular communications are going to be tied together. And that's what's exciting about this and where we're going.
So I was going to say, I'm going to butt in if I need to stop Ian asking another of his long-ass questions. And give the last word to Ray on what we've just been talking about.
Yeah, so I think when I look at the role of sensing, I think back to 4G, and it's now clear to me in hindsight that 4G did 2 things. Connected you to the native internet, and using the GPS network, it knew where you were. And so location awareness with internet access became a platform, and that's what created the Ubers of the world and all the other things of the world. Those are not developed by operators. Operators created a robust pipe to the internet combined with GPS so that location awareness and internet access could be coupled as a platform. 6G will do the same thing with situational awareness. And you'll ask, well, what's the difference? Well, it's not just like where's the Starbucks, but literally everything around you at scale means everything in the world. There'll be a digital twin of the entire physical universe. Public safety will monetize it one way. The defense industry will monetize it a different way. But commercial companies will find ways to monetize situational awareness. I'm convinced of it.
The potential is incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking futuristic right there. It's beyond my imagination to think what we're going to do with it. But I can see how, I'll be honest, we touched on it once or twice when we were chatting, how 5G, Tom, you sort of alluded to it, maybe overpromised a little bit. And now we've got 6G coming up, and speaking only for myself, I suspect Ian, as he's someone I've spent lots of time chatting with, we're thinking, well, you don't want to be overpromising on 6G. But this ISAC stuff and some of the stuff that you two have been kind enough to educate us on today does make me think, all right, maybe that will be a bit game-changing, and that's quite exciting.
So it's going to be a bit controversial here, too. So we are going to have 6G. I've joked about this for almost a decade now. We're going to go to 6G because
We're going to have it.
We're going to have
Is it going to be any good?
We have to go to 6G because the marketers are going to need something else to sell in the near future.
Well, right.
Because,
This is our skepticism.
yeah, but 6G will be the last G.
Oh, wow.
It's all going to be software from there on.
First
It's
hit.
going to be evolutionarily based after that. It's going to be software upgrades.
I heard the same thing said about 5G a few years ago.
Yeah, but again, we have to cut
So
the
if 7G
cut
comes
the
along, I'm
crust.
going to get you back to Dublin to explain yourself.
Very good.
Well, look, that's a cool note on which to end it. Tom, it was great to just spontaneously bump into you in Dublin like this. And obviously you two, Ray and Ronnie. In fact, that is some lush Jamesons. That was
Very good.
there. So I'll wrap it up there. I'm not quite sure how we're going to package this into the rest of the stuff we're going to do here. But thank you both. That was really good fun. And we'll let the locals come into our little corner of the pub now. So cheers.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks. Okay. And thanks for listening.